So I guess it's time to have an open discussion. Shall we start by maybe asking the panel itself if it has any additional reflections about each other's ideas?
Yeah, I actually would have a question to you concerning the FDA approval. So what we stumble over the problem that a company invents something that's completely new, has to go through a PMA. And then another company, a competitor, has a similar, maybe a different field, but also very new, related to this one. And they are just simply waiting for each other who moves first. The guy who moves first pays everything, and the other one just is a follower and get a much cheaper FDA approval by just following the other one. That's a terrible problem. The first one gets a penalty. Usually it should be the other way around.
Well, unfortunately, I think you have discovered one of the principles in society. The first ones often get punished. Your observation is not wrong, and certainly there are mechanisms through the 510K mechanism to make reference to a previously invented device or method in that context. I don't know how to mitigate that, but I guess it has to do with the risk and benefit evaluations, and certainly it wouldn't be fair to expose an individual or the public to something that has not undergone a considerable assessment for its safety and efficacy and quality as well. So I think you picked up on a conundrum in some way, and I don't have a good solution to offer. The only thing that I can add, or I would inspire, is to think about ways to share the burden, and I'm not sure if it can be done in a collaborative way in a pre-competitive space, or if there is a mechanism for society or for the federal government, for example, to recognize a specific need with such innovation and perhaps carry some of the burden. So it comes back to the recognition of a societal responsibility in some of the progress that we make, and certainly recognize that it takes resources to get there. And I believe there should be at least a philosophical basis to share the burden of driving progress.
Please.
I also appreciate the idea of personalized medicine. However, I'm aware that the idea came just a few decades ago when it slowly became possible to have an entire sequence of my genomic information. In the meantime, it has been more and more clear that in addition to my own genetic information, those of many different kinds of bacteria which are part of my body also help in my life, most of them not being pathogenic but symbiotic. So the so-called microbiome is a part of basic information for personalized medicine. But there is more to come. More and more we do see that habits which we human beings have to deal with our own life is very important. For example, it is since a number of years now known that if a daily diet, nutritional habits are such that they are too uniform and not equilibrated for all you need, and we do know that we need a number of micronutrients, and this is of particular importance for the embryonic and post-embryonic development of young children, for one says between conception and the first 1,000 days. And that means that sometimes things go wrong in the early development, and some of these wrong-going things are fixed epigenetically and are never reversible during life, sometimes leading to early death and so on. But people suffer from that. And I think we should pay attention to all of these, also other habits which we have, which have their influence on our life health.
Frank?
I certainly agree on this, in a sense, philosophical statement, and I fully support it. One of the things in the context of personalized medicine, though, I would like to give to consider, I think the term personalized medicine has been waking up, or has been brought into the front of discussion not so long ago, but I'm a physician, and I can tell you that in many ways, and being trained as a physician, the tradition to focus on the person and as such performing and practicing personalized medicine has not been just developed with the concept of the term personalized medicine. In many ways, physicians always have focused on the person and not the disease, and as such, the treatment has been, if a well-trained and well-educated physician treats a person, not a disease. And as such, I think we should be mindful also in reflecting that philosophically. But there's important elements that are historically and traditionally that have been performed and that have been practiced that we shouldn't lose sight of, because some of it we cannot replace by just technology or electronics and the most sophisticated system in terms of Watson and what else might there be on the horizon, cannot necessarily replace the quality of care that we still perform as human beings, as a service to human beings. So I think that has to be seen also in context.
I think you were first.
Thank you. I'm fascinated. It is my first time participation in the Clinam, and I am taking advantage of such elite super brains. The question is about the geographical specificity and how FDA deal with such phenomenon. We know that the same pathogenic ecological factor, environmental factor, induce symptomatology. The symptomatology, however, toward the same pathogenic factor is too close. Thank you. Is different in China. Is different among the Papuas people. Is different in Europe, in South America. Of course, FDA claims, like Pentagon, that they have answered to everything. So how FDA deal with such different symptomatology induced, evoked by the same ecological pathogen?
Well, I guess it's a specific FDA question, as I understand it. I would first want to demystify the notion that FDA claims to know everything. That's truly not the case, and particularly in the past decade, I would say, decision-making processes are clearly based on data, and of course we recognize that there is limited data and there's limited understanding, and as such we are just part of society and part of the equation as anyone else. Now you bring up a very important point in terms of the local environment and the also genetic differences that we have. I mean, to 99% we are the same, but there are differences that genetically are reflected, and as such, clinical pharmacologist and pharmacogenomics tries to address that. We have certainly several research initiatives to develop tools for reviewers to enable them to consider the geographic distribution or the origin of the individuals enrolled in clinical trials and the data that has been generated on this basis, so that a better assessment and consideration of the clinical data in the context of the treatment and the conditions, as much as the nutritional status and the situation during the treatment has to have has to be a factor in the consideration. So I completely agree with you that this is a field where we are just at the beginning to understand the complexity, not to mention the microbiome in the context and how this in fact influences and makes identical twins actually not so identical, for example. And then let's reflect on the immune system that is developing in identical twins in different ways just because they're exposed at different times to different challenges. And I think, at least scientifically, we have awareness of it. Practically, we don't necessarily have all the tools that help us analyze the information, nor can we instigate or force sponsors to provide data complex enough to find pattern and clear rules. But this is part of the science that we want to investigate, develop, and drive. And that's one of the areas where FDA plays a very active role to not actually lag behind as often regulators are described in their science. This is science that we are actively driving. And here, for many reasons, the union of regulating food, dietary supplements, and drugs and medical devices is an advantage, because at least it is under one governance. Not to say that there aren't challenges in that.
So there are many questions in the room. I don't want to cut off.
Just a sub-chapter of this whole thinking. Should we assume, Professor Arber and you, that we have a genomic wisdom of adaptability of the human species? We survived. Life is an eternity. The Big Bang is an eternity. It's not the end. Correct? So we have to have some mechanisms of genomic adaptability. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just a little fellow immunologist, nothing else.
I personally am aware of the limitation of our knowledge.
Me too. Thank you.
I don't want to cut off too quickly, but there are many questions in the room, I see. I think on the left there, yours was the first.
Okay, I want to come and, follow up our very distinguished panel and take back Patrick that took us to this wonderful journey and the few people who make the change. And I want to converge that to, the personalized medicine and the changes that we talked during our lifestyle, and combine it to the big data. And the big data enable us to understand what we need. But if we really want to follow these special people, we need the big data versus the small data, which are the special people who make the change. So I'm not, the big data will provide the common, and then we have to look on all the complexity, all these small, very special people that we'll have to treat. And it's two different approaches that we have to take, and just stick to the uniqueness that it's not only the mechanism. The big data will provide the mechanism, and then we have to go to different way to these small, very special people. And that, I want to come back to the last remark regarding the sociology, or maybe the society. And just, to take you following the same, that the most refined or optimized society is our cells in the body that was refined through the evolution. And maybe, and we are running such a project, to learn how they are behaving as a society with their soldiers and with their behaviors and so on. Just, you know, Bia talked about art. This is a matter of art. Thank you very much. It was very innovative, always of innovation, and very inspiring. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Maybe could I?
So I just want to step back and go and pick up on a couple of points, and this is centered primarily around you, Gert. And Frank, you brought up the issue of human-to-human contact and the ability to only hold so much in one's mind at a time. Gert, I would ask you, based on the work that you have done so far, have you seen any new types of learning structures starting to emerge? And let me sharpen the point. I teach anatomy. I never would have thought to take a three-dimensional printer and print a head in color, in 3 dimensions, full size, and have the students stand around and watch the head emerge from the 3-dimensional print, and then have them go over to the cadaver and do the head and neck dissection. So it's a completely new paradigm in a learning structure. I did it, and the 1-month class just on head and neck took 1 week, and those students learned more than the students were there for the entire month. So with that as a background, have you seen any new types of learning structures or new ways for us to approach the big data, if you will, or new ways for us to interact and to train, because we're in a field that isn't a field, it's a lot of fields, and all of us are stretching beyond some of our capabilities into areas where we are not comfortable. So,
yes, I agree with what you say. I mean, in principle, whenever something new comes up, suddenly new opportunities show up. Like your example with the printer, 10 years ago nobody would have thought about that this is so easy and that you can do it so nicely. And once you have it, suddenly you can do with it something you haven't thought about beforehand. And actually we are in the same situation with this big data approach on images or on text. Suddenly new structures show up and people have their mouths open and never thought about it before, and it's actually happening right now. And then you have to go into the details and have to explain why that is, and to understand. Then you build up the trust, yeah? People using it and doing it and showing that you have a benefit from it. That changes then relatively fast the world. I experienced that something like 30 years ago, inventing the scanning tunneling microscope. It was a similar situation, something new, and people suddenly got inspired and used the technology. In the beginning, nobody trusted in this technology. Everyone thought, I'm not sure whether it actually works at all. And then people picking it up and working with it and suddenly seeing, yeah, I can do something, can solve problems I could not solve before. And then it explodes, because then it somehow, like a wave, it goes around the world, and people want to be part of that. And then the knowledge is shared, and you are in a completely different situation than you have been before.
Patrick, I think you were going to say something.
Yes, I wanted to make an argument, not because I'm your enemy, but because I think it's very interesting about this notion of big data as the solution for medicine. Now, mathematically, if you want to solve a problem, the simplified version to do that is to use linear algebra, solving linear equations. The operational complexity of solving a linear equation is n by the power of 2.3. And maybe at some point we come to the point when we can do it by n by the power of 2. This means if you want to analyze 1 million variables, and we have much more variables in a single cell than 1 million, That means you need at least a millions operation. If you have a billion variables, then you need a billions operation in the very best case. And we know that computing is not a continuously improving technology, but there is a hard upper end which we will reach. Where it exactly is, we will find out. But probably the best thing we can do to simulate life, to simulate a cell, is just to have a cell which lives, because it simulates itself the best, and all other simulations are crude simplifications of what happens in life. So despite the fact that one of my students just submitted his thesis about high-performance computation in our field, I'm somewhat skeptical that all the promises of high-performance computing will be fulfilled.
Maybe a very short reply. I agree with what you said. I mean, the moment you have an approach that's completely hypothesis-free, then you encounter combinatorial problems. Too many possibilities. So you have to use your knowledge to limit this number of possibilities from the beginning. But then it's a little bit hypothesis-free. Completely hypothesis-free leads you nowhere. But if you limit your system by introducing the knowledge, what you have already today about systems biology and all these different pathology knowledges that are around in the heads of the pathologists, introducing that and then limit your system to a certain amount, and not a million variables, but maybe 100 or so. Then you can do a very big step forward.
Sort of brings us back to the role of the individual in Patrick's talk. I thought that was something very important being said there about people that care drive innovation. So there's still this central need for individual intervention. I sometimes wonder whether the role that individuals play in all of this process and all of this development has been eroded a little bit. Earlier on we spoke about the forces on people to raise funds and almost a commoditization of the scientific venture. Have we lost a sense of the sacredness, of the preciousness of what we do as scientists? Do we really see our role? Is the economy enough to drive everything, or do we need people who care? Anyway, Lou, and then next.
All right, I'd like to go back and suggest a modification for Patrick. And instead of the linear starting from the need, ending with the society, put it in a circle, because the need is there. Not everywhere and not for everybody. And yes, there are individuals, some of them, who first recognize or made the invention or made their discovery. But then they alone, and just like with the data, alone, just people. They have to get started organized, smaller groups, laboratory research groups, scientific meetings. If I compare Clinam, the first Clinam meeting to this one, there's an incredible development. And that was a seed of something, and now this is it, which really has some power moving forward, having government and regulatory representatives present, thinking about what else can be done in positive. So this is my comment. And the reason for we care, that's also very important. The scheme is very general. There would be positive reasons and there could be negative reasons as well. It's just human nature. It's balance and equilibrium, dynamic. Thanks.
You're next.
I very much appreciate the remarks of the panel and the discussion, and I have a question I'd like to address to Professor Binning. When I was growing up, not quite in the days of the abacus, but at least the slide rule, when computers were just evolving, one of the popular concepts of the day was if you put enough monkeys in front of enough keyboards, sooner or later you would write Shakespeare. And so if we take big data and we accumulate more and more data and we apply more and more, we look for more and more correlations between this data, then are we just increasing the chance that we're going to find spurious correlations that don't really exist? And there was recently a very good statistical paper that showed that if you start with a hypothesis, you increase the statistical chance of proving that the hypothesis was correct.
Yeah, I agree to that very much. That's why I'm saying it's not just a top-down approach where you just do some statistics and you come to some conclusion. That's not enough. You have to then go bottom-up again and connect all the scales. That's what you said before, that you connect all the different methods and all the different scales with each other and connect the top-down with the bottom-up approach and see, can I understand what came out? Does it make sense? You have to go through this procedure. Otherwise, you might be fooled by some statistics. There are a lot of examples where people are simply fooled by statistics. You have to put in some thoughts to reason about it, whether it makes sense or it doesn't make sense. Yeah. That's certainly something that's very important. And I don't believe that that ever a Japanese would be able to write Shakespeare. I think our structure of the brain is evolved over the thousands or millions of years to a state where we can think how we think today. And I think the structure of our brain will even change in the future, and we have our limitations today because of the structure of the brain, and the structure of the brain has to change that we can think beyond what we can think today.
3 quick questions. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3. Go.
Yeah, I have a question for Patrick. In your Swiss modesty, you left out an important person based in Basel, Paracelsus. And do you have any comment? I think Paracelsus is known. He was one of the first, or maybe the first, to recognize the importance of the mind in medicine, in patients, that they can actually influence their physical state and their maybe even disease state with their mind. Do you have any comment regarding that? And it was also maybe the role of religion, that religious people sometimes they have miracles. There's Buddhism where people starve and get all kinds of changes in their state. So do you have any comments regarding the role of the mind in medicine?
Quick question, quick answer, I think. It's impossible quick.
I estimate your comment very much, and I think it really adds to the big picture, and I don't have anything to add. Just a single word. My most revered Swiss person is Euler. I think he has even a more profound impact on what we believe. He had to abandon Basel to live in St. Petersburg. This is just a small side effect of history.
2.
Just a very quick comment. Patrick, what you presented tells me that almost nothing inspires people to do good and to innovate like good examples of who has done it in the past. And maybe this point relates back to the question of, does the first innovator have too big a burden? Well, what is the reward of that innovator? I mean, we have 2 Nobel Prize winners. What was the most important thing that you really carry away? Is it the fact that you're a Nobel Prize winner, or the money you get, or the very fact that you did the innovation that you did?
I believe man is created as an innovator. Man is an innovator as a being, and I think this is the prime reward of doing what man is. So I think money is always nice and recognition is always nice, but building something with your own hands which then works. So this kind of creativity, I think this is built into man and this is its own reward.
Absolutely right. He has it. 2 quick comments from I think you two.
Yeah, maybe I can add that maybe there are different people in the world, and some people don't care, like you said, and still they innovate. So some people just are curious, or they play around with something and they stumble over something that's interesting. So there are very different ways how to innovate in the world. But once you have done it, it's certainly a great feeling because you somehow changed the world. And I agree very much. We are made like that. We have this task to somehow change the world.
I think it's me. Okay, I think one important thing that we didn't discuss at all is the role of serendipity in the innovation. I think it has a tremendous role, and we have to take it into account.
I agree. I made my statement because sometimes there is a risk of loss of equilibrium, and we have talked about science for 3 days, and we tend to forget that technology is important and science is important, but maybe it's not all.
I'm sorry I'm not getting to everybody else because there's so many. You're next, certainly.
Thank you. I really appreciate for those who care, and not only to organize Clinam, but also all the speakers and all who put efforts into innovation. But my question is, there are also a lot of demand and the rising cost of healthcare. How do you see the balance between the rising cost of healthcare, all the different efforts which needs to be taken, all the demands, and the restrictions in healthcare? For me, this is quite a difficult question to answer, and this is this honorable panel, and I think that would be very interesting to hear your thoughts about this.
Frank, maybe?
Yes. Of course, your observation is absolutely correct, and this is a struggle for any society, our days, to be responsible and carry the responsibility of humankind, just as you described historically, recognized in many ways through passion and compassion. And I think this was the original driver, the humanity that made us recognize it as a very important function that we have to carry as a society. I think in some ways it got a bit blown out of proportion in the context of the means that we have and perhaps the tools that we use. But in principle it comes back to the humanity and the desire and understanding of the need to support and nurture, because otherwise our society would break, and otherwise our spirit perhaps would break and we would fail to be human beings. So I'm optimistic that as a society we will find solutions and use the resources that we have in a meaningful way. Certainly the challenges that industry is facing and that the healthcare systems are facing are enormous, and there are, all those band-aids that we are trying to apply, some of which will work to some extent, others not. But again, in my mind, it's an important question to focus back on the most fundamental principles, and as such, as human beings, we will find ways to be human beings. If I may just add one more comment in the context of education and the approach we take to education, I think we need to rethink, and we need to get away from the, let's say, somewhat stereotypic academic approach of subject matter and speciality areas. Not that it is not important to have experts in specific areas, but what I think we do not do enough is teach young kids, and start with very young kids, to teach them how to solve problems in a complex way, to integrate what now is called the convergence approach of different specialty areas into the solution of a problem, because this is really where the strength of human beings has been in the past. And coming to the point of serendipity, yes, serendipity, but I have to recognize it. And to recognize it, you have to have hope, you have to have spirit, you have to feel a purpose, and you have to be passionate. And as such, I think it connects something back to the human senses, and it connects back perhaps to something that we often call a spirit. And I think the spirit is what not only unites this community here, but I think this is also what we carry into the world, to perhaps as the strongest and most significant tool or power to make changes.
You were sorry.
I'm sorry. Can I?
Oh, please.
Go
ahead.
It's just a short experience of my life, talking the same way, creativity, limits. A few years ago, the governor of Colorado, United States, invited the president of Russian Academy of Science, the biggest world mathematician, Yuri Ivanovich Marchuk. And he asked me how we can impress him, this big mathematician. Well, I said, well, we take him to Boulder, Colorado. This is the biggest meteorological earthquake center in the world. All right, let's go. Marchuk, super intelligent, very nice fellow, friend of Gorbachev, came up there very jovial and said, what I can do for you? Can you predict the weather after 5 days? What will happen in Colorado? Just a moment. We cannot predict. We can predict the weather with the limits to the 5 days. No problem. Give me a paper, give me a pencil, give me a room. In 15 minutes, he came back from the room and he threw some equation to those biggest brain computers. But I put this in the computer. And what happened? I'm sorry, sir. Our computers are too slow. We cannot answer to your equation. So you have the answer. We have limitless creativity, and we are not a slave of the limits of machine. And here is the spirit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think maybe there's a last, if you could make some quick interventions.
Yes, Leonardo da Vinci was a macro observer. He observed birds and suggested aviation, open cadavers, and tried to study life. And look at the heart. Mechanical pump, it's a biochemical industry, it's a power plant. This question is for Dr. Werner Arber. Have you thought about the nth dimension? Because traditionally a macro observer used the convenient instruments of linear mathematics just because they were convenient, Newtonian and linear mathematics. We know today, especially those who are here, that real-life phenomena indeed are very far from equilibrium and very nonlinear. But in life, we have experiences that cannot be explained neither by a macro observation nor by a micro observation. I'm talking about spiritual experiences, and you mentioned in the book of Genesis. So have you thought about the nth dimension?
Could I ask you also to speak, and then the questions can be handled together?
I hope this will be short. I also have to name another citizen of Switzerland, Ambassador Bernoulli, and this is to link also to the mathematics. And the message for me is that I think it's fundamental to share. I have been with incredible amount of analysis, in sometimes in a small transcriptomics done with maybe 10 samples. And at the same time, we have a huge amount of patient material data that is not analyzed because we don't have the resources and is nearly forgotten, and we don't share. So as a community, I think this is the most important if we want to advance. And we are in a field now that particularly sharing is how we can make the things to happen.
You should say the last thing.
Well, let me just say, I appreciate, of course, very much the impact of mathematics, of whatever we can do, but it has its limits. And I think we are in a process still nowadays, fortunately, because I'm very happy to know that not all important questions have found solutions in the natural sciences. So there is still enough questions for future generations of researchers. Just my observation was that we believe too much into what you have seen to work efficiently with high yield is how nature works all the time. This is true in part, but certainly not. I'm an evolutionary biologist. In evolution, things have to be very slow, non-reproducible, and trial and error processes. So this is much more difficult to solve with mathematical questions, equations. So I see that experimental investigations are very important to feed in data, big data, in order to finally link the thing together, and mathematics may at that moment play some role, of course. So we have to confess that many things are not explained so far.
And so I think
and maybe the point to the sharing, I think there are a lot of people in the world that have enough wisdom to share their data, and that's why we are here. We share ideas and we share data, and that's perfect, yeah. And people put their data also into the internet, and other people can try and play with those data. So that's happening more and more.
But
I think that the idea of sharing is
maybe it should be regulated that we can profit, because to share and to do it well, we should be able to be comparable. And this is what I wanted to say, is the spirit of sharing and sharing. Be prepared to share, and like that you could have a kind of comparison data set in two parts of the globe. It's happening, I know, but it still could be done even better and in a bigger scale.
Yes, absolutely.
So then I think the last comment to close comes from someone who cares, and someone who's caring has led to this meeting. And so let's leave it with you, Beat.
Well, actually there is only one thing I want to say, and that is that we will meet next year from June 28 to July 1 for all those who want to come back to Clinam after these days of the meeting and the excursion which we are going to do tomorrow. I think we have made a step forward again to being together, learning from each other, communicate, and to take care about nanomedicine and its development in the future, in the near future, in a nearer future than if Clinam would not have this event. I would like to tell you now that all of you who are still in Basel are cordially invited to come to the goodbye dinner. It will be a light dinner. We meet at 20 to 7 in the lobby of the plaza, and we'll walk together. And with that, I would like to close this conference.